That's me.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad. I was looking and
I've got everything queued up.
you're the man. All right.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for dragging yourself out of bed. For some of us, I think that was a little bit more difficult than for others, but we're all back here again for the final day of the, what is this, 2018? How'd that happen? 2018 Lion Summit, and we've got another day that's pretty jam-packed with some really interesting sessions and speakers, and of course, one of the most important things about a Lion Summit is you guys being involved in the conversation, sharing your ideas. So we're going to try and work in a little bit more Q&A than we had time for yesterday, today, but unfortunately that's still going to be limited because of our logistical issues. But especially at lunch, during the coffee breaks, you know, keep all that conversation going. We should, again, thank the people that make this possible. And a big part of that is your Lion Board of Directors. Guys, stand up, board members. These folks got themselves here at 7 a.m. to get all of this put together. And two of the people who work the hardest at making this happen for us every year are our board member, Charlotte Ann Lucas. Stand up, CA, let him, and her husband, Willie. These guys do wonders for us, and they deserve a lot of pats on the back. And some other people who deserve a hearty thank you are, of course, the Knight Foundation, Facebook, our hosts here at Columbia College for making this all possible. They've been very generous hosts. The Democracy Fund, the Ethics and Excellence in Journalism Foundation, our sponsors for this conference, the News Revenue Hub, the Neiman Foundation, the Center for Cooperative Media, the Poynter Institute, and the really great business side vendors who are here who make this possible, and also for them for being part of this conversation and wanting to understand our needs as local indie publishers as we all figure out how to rebuild local news. It's a really good thing that they are here, not just to try and sell some stuff, and they're trying to do that, of course, but they're also here to listen and create new things that will help us do our jobs. And Broad Street Ads, The Clean Machine, Empower Local, Maps.com, Site Impact, Town News, Virtual Committees, Web Publisher Pro. Let's give them a quick round of applause for that. Thank you. Thanks. And to get right into things, we've got I think I'm going to pay some sharp attention to this one, because Jay Allred always brings some really good tips. I just want to steal like every idea he comes up with, and he's going to throw a few more out for us. Come on up, Jay.
I'll get you going.
Cool.
So first of all, test. Am I good? All right, thanks. Let's round of applause for Corey, who's running our soundboard today and is going to make us all look good. Thank you, Corey. And to John at Four Top Eds, thank you so much for loaning me your clicker, because I don't know how to do slide presentations from behind a lectern. So this is how I do it, and so we're going to go from here. Uriah's going to cue me up here. Just so while we're getting ready, my name is Jay Allred. I am president of richlandsource.com. We are located in Mansfield, Ohio, which is a small legacy city in the middle of the Rust Belt. So think Cleveland, Youngstown, Akron. You pretty much understand who we are. So what I'm here to talk to you about today is I'm going to talk to you about something that we did this year that we had never done before, and how I think that it can apply to your businesses because of some inherent strengths that you all have, that we all share in telling stories. And I want to talk, we're going to start a little bit with the power of story as soon as Uriah has us squared away. So first of all, show of hands, how many of you have raised money from private funders to support your journalism? And I don't mean public foundation funders, I mean private funders to just support your journalism. Show of hands. Great, that's good. How many would like to do that?
That one shows.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So that's a good show of hands.
This one.
Well, this is sort of an awkward pause, right? This is
And we're holding, and we're holding, and we're holding.
Yes.
Jay, do you have any hobbies?
That's excellent. How about those brewers? Yeah, no, recovering Cleveland Browns fan. Yeah, that's us. All kinds of problems in the Rust Belt.
We're getting it to show on this just fine, but it's not like spitting out on the other one.
Do you have it on present?
Yes, yeah, it's showing here.
That's super weird because.
But the PowerPoint will mirror just fine, but the Google won't.
Do you mind?
Go
Please.
ahead.
Which one do you
Please.
want?
This.
Yeah, you can totally do this. It's mirroring the monitor.
Is that what you want?
Yeah.
It's exactly what we want.
Can we give it up for Four Top Eds?
I don't,
You can
Present
totally
over
do
the
this,
share
man.
actually, I don't know where that one is.
By the share button.
Yeah, so.
How about the present button? I think we were almost home, Uriah.
Right.
There you go.
There you go.
Hey!
Oh, sweet Jesus, we're here.
This is what you get at a conference.
That's right. It's all about DIY. So we've kind of done this intro thing that I was going to do, but so my presentation is about how you can do what we did, and what I'm going to talk to you about is how we raised $72,000 in 30 days from all private funders, specifically to support our solutions journalism work at Richland Source. And I fully believe, since we are a collection of knuckleheads, you can do this too. It's not that hard. So I want to start with the power of story. We are all trained as journalists, or if we're business people, we lead journalists, and we understand that the open-ended questions are how we suss out stories. That's how we understand and bring context to narratives. And one of those questions is why. In my opinion, why is the single most important question that we have to answer if we expect our communities, either our readers, or in the case of this example, our private stakeholders in our communities to support local news. The reality is, why is the most important question? The problem as news organizations is that oftentimes we just want to say, because I said so, and make that the relevant answer. And I would argue that that is not an effective answer. Not in today's climate, but frankly, not in yesterday's climate either. Because I said so is an answer that you give a 4-year-old who you need to corral and move to their room at bedtime. That is not an answer that you give to the public that you want to have a relationship with and that you want to support you financially so you can do your job. Because I said so is not an appropriate answer. But I want you to think a little bit about the times that you've viewed your audience or your funders with a little bit of contempt. Arrogance is a journalistic problem. It's real. We have it. It's there. I've got it too. We know all the stuff that we need to know. We're the smart people in the room. We could use a little bit less of that, because that leads to because I said so. The solution to this is to figure out why you exist. And this is why I think what we did can work for you. Because why you exist, it doesn't really matter why you exist. You exist for different reasons. My publication exists, we understand why we're there. I would venture to say that our why is different from a lot of yours. There are people that in this room that I know run hardcore watchdog investigative news sites. That is a different why than I have, than my organization has. It is equally important. It matters to people. But if you don't know what your why is, you are not going to be able to effectively tell your story, and you are not going to be able to effectively connect with the people that want to support what you do. If you understand why you exist, you will find your supporters, and your supporters will find you. So why does Richland Source exist? This is it. We exist to tell the whole story of our communities and to uncover through our journalism effective responses to problems that hold us back from our true potential. That's why we're here. There's backstory to all of that, that depending on if a supporter or a detractor wants to know what that means, we can talk to them about that because we understand our story. So we're gonna take about a 5-minute pause here, and we're gonna do movie time. Because it's easy for me to tell you why we exist, but in this particular case, it's gonna be a lot easier if I just show you. So this is a 5-minute video. Everybody kind of relax, enjoy yourself, and I'm gonna see if I can turn it on. We moved the window, right, Uriah? I didn't see what you guys did. There we are. Bingo.
I am currently 27 weeks, and I'll be 28 on Sunday. When I first got pregnant, where I went to look for information, I don't really know, actually.
Richland County, which is where we live and report, was ranked last among Ohio's 88 counties for infant mortality rates, and last is a bad thing.
It was still just kind of a throwaway line in a political speech that really seemed to stick out. We spent several weeks into months researching, figuring out how we were going to attack this, and not just tell the story, but look for how other people are approaching this particular problem in their communities.
Solutions journalism is all about looking for the solution to the problem instead of just presenting the problem. And we were kind of doing that before we even knew what solutions journalism was. I was sitting in the office on a Sunday afternoon, and my publisher, Jay Allred, walks in the room.
There was a section in that last of the 3 stories that talked about the cost of baby boxes.
Baby boxes are an idea that comes from Finland that has babies basically sleeping in cardboard boxes, but they're really cute, baby-friendly cardboard boxes.
And I did some quick math and I realized that most mid-sized companies in the county spend more on a golf outing than it would take to give a box to every single birth mother in the county, along with all of the educational resources that came along with it.
In January, we brought in all the players that might be involved in infant mortality somehow in Richland County.
And then we put that reporting in front of them and just said, look, we need to think about this.
There's so much of my notes, my meetings that I had.
SJN wanted us to look at what can you do with audience engagement.
So then it was a question of how do you make infant mortality engaging?
Somebody came up with this idea of, well, what if we just flipped the script?
Instead of focusing on the sad parts of infant mortality, let's focus on the positive parts of being pregnant and having a baby. And what's more positive than a baby shower?
I think that was what led to what became an all hands on deck event.
We wanted to use whatever salesmanship and marketing expertise that we have in order to make sure that participants were aware of the event and could be here.
I never knew like a community could put on such a big event for all people that are pregnant and then people that have even had children already.
At 9 a.m., I walked outside to help people unload their cars, and I could already see people lined up for the baby shower at 9 a.m. It didn't start till 10. And I was like, what are we getting ourselves into?
From every group of people in the community, the response was extremely positive and overwhelming.
But when you first walked in, you could get like refreshments and you had to sign in, and they would give you a little card that you had to get 10 stamps on for your gift bag.
I wanted them to come and engage with these organizations and learn something that day. From 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., we saw almost 200 mothers and almost 500 people come through the community baby shower.
They were connecting with people that could help them have a healthy pregnancy.
I never even knew that there was a such thing as a community health worker, and Robin has really helped me out through my entire pregnancy.
If we can make an impact, if we can save one baby's life just through all of this information that we put out there, then it was worth it.
I keep getting feedback of people saying, there's so much more to this story. This is such a wide topic and it touches so many parts of life. And to really realize that we hit the nail on the head as far as an event that was exactly right, that it was exactly what this community needs. It reminded me why I did this in the first place.
I am currently 20.
There you go.
So yeah, how do we follow that? It was a transformative experience for our newsroom and our belief in our capabilities, but it was rooted in why. It was rooted in our why. It was rooted in the fact that our job was to use our journalism to help our community overcome problems that were holding them back from their true potential. If you live in the United States of America and your infant mortality rate sucks as bad as ours did, that's a problem that's holding your community back. And it's rooted in all kinds of different things that we couldn't solve as journalists. We needed to bring people together. Now, the Solutions Journalism Network was generous with us, and they have been incredible partners for us, and they have become just absolutely bound up with us in our why. We don't really know how we talk about what we do without talking about solutions journalism as a way of thinking. It is so bound up in us now. We just, it is just it's part of our DNA. So what happens when that becomes part of your DNA in your newsroom is that your newsroom wants to do more of that stuff. Well, in our case, I think that what we wanted to do this year, for the next year, was to take on 2 major year-long projects. One of them is called Rising from Rust, and the other is called Gray Matters. Rising from Rust tackles the future of small Midwestern legacy cities that are dealing with post-industrial America. What does Mansfield become? What does Akron become? The steel mills aren't there anymore. Those huge union-based jobs that built the country in the late 19th century and early 20th century are no longer there. What do these cities become? What's their future look like? And then in a completely different vein, we're looking at the fact that our population is aging rapidly. This is, of course, a fact across America, but in Richland County, Ohio, and in the neighboring counties, the resources to deal with an aging population and to support our elders and their caregivers are not what we would love for them to be, but we don't have the answer to that, so we want to look into it. So the reality, part 2, is that doing great journalism costs money. I mean, our managing editor works wonders with time and giving our journalists time when we don't have money and allowing them to work on these stories as they can, because of course we have to feed the beast as well. We still have to cover crime. We still have to cover our community completely. This is our passion, but there's other things that pull at us. But the reality is you can't do this kind of work without some money. So here's what we did. We started with our newsroom, and we all sat down together. There were no sides in this discussion. There was not a business side and a news side. We were all in the same boat. And we settled on this idea that what if, it was very strategic, because we talked about crowdsourcing this project $1 at a time. We talked about 20 different opportunities. And what we settled on was, well, wait a minute. We've got all this capital built up, this psychic capital in our community. They believe in what we're doing. They have seen what we've accomplished. We are wearing the white hat right now. What if we went out and asked them to put their money where their mouth was? What if we went out and what if we created a way that they could understand that every dollar that they gave to these projects would go directly to the journalism? And we started to think about this like kind of NPR or PBS. And we started to have these dialogues about this episode of Frontline was brought to you by the generous contributions of the Eli Roth Foundation, the Knight Ridder Foundation. And we started to think through that. It's like, what could that look like in a local context? And so we set a goal. We said, we're going to try to raise $50,000 in a month from private funders, and we're going to see if we can do this. Now, in our case, our plan was that we would build some tiers and some levels. We would talk to people in a language that they're familiar with. So we would, and we'll look at those, but gold, silver, bronze. We would understand what the guardrails were. So when we talked to these folks, what did they understand that they were doing, and what did they understand that they were not doing? It was very important to us that our journalistic independence was maintained. So we built guardrails before we ever talked to anybody. This is about your why. You have to apply what we did and this sort of process that I'm talking to you about. Think about why you exist. We made a simple plan, which I'm going to share with all of you. We would make the calls. We would be very transparent about what we were doing and what we were not doing. We were seeking to disqualify people. If somebody was not comfortable with it, if it didn't fit their objectives, if there wasn't a match between who they were and who we were and what they believed and what we believed, it was totally okay. We wanted to not put square pegs in round holes. We wanted square pegs in square holes. We would explain our why once again to these funders. We would walk right up to them and we would ask them for their support. We would be very transparent of it. We want to do this work. We want to attack these problems. This is what we have proven to you that we can do, and I need you to write me a check. We would be thankful to them. We would lead with gratitude, and we would repeat that process over and over again until we would get to $50,000. So let's break into this a little bit. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to interrupt. Starting in the newsroom, we talked about this a little bit. This was baked in from the very beginning. The newsroom drove this process. They were passionate about it. These were the stories that they wanted to do. And so my role as the publisher and your role will start to come clear to you here in a minute. They knew what their why was. So we set a goal, $50,000. We got agreement on what our boundaries were going to be. They drove that discussion. My job as a publisher, because I know how to ask for money. I'm good at it. It's a skill. I'm connected in the business community because of my role in my company. So I know how to do those things. But we started with the journalism, because what people connect with is the work that you guys do and that we do. They do not give a shit about my advertising metrics when it comes to a project like this. They care about the words and the stories and the videos and the podcasts and the impact that we have. I don't care whether you are chasing corrupt politicians or whether you are throwing community baby showers. The thing that drives audience loyalty is the work that you do. Never forget that value. So we came to an agreement on where the boundaries were going to be. There was going to be no influence of the editorial direction. We would follow the stories where they took us. There was no oversight from any of the funders about anything that published. They were not involved in that process whatsoever. We made a simple plan. We broke this thing down into foundation, gold, silver, and bronze. We took $50,000 and we divided it up and we created a limited number of slots. In sales, that's called creating scarcity if you don't already have it. We created scarcity. There was only so many slots. We broke this thing down, and I'm looking up here because my eyes are bad. The bronze level, their name and logo was on our partner page. We would link to their URL. They were invited to all of our solutions journalism events. If they were ticketed events, they were given preferred seating and they were invited free of charge. They get a quarterly update with our newsroom. So we do bring them into the newsroom to tell them what's going on. What are the stories that we're working on? What was the impact? How are the page views? How many people are we reaching? We talk to them and we update them. In fact, our managing editor has taken that from quarterly to monthly, actually. He's accelerated that process so he can have a better dialogue with our newsroom partners. And that's what we called them. We called them newsroom partners. We gave it a name. Silver levels, we're going to recognize you from the podium at every event that we get. You're recognized on all outro slides. So if we're doing a presentation or we're making a video, you're recognized on outro slides. Gold levels, now we're starting with printed material. There's cost involved. We did some pull-up banners that we invested in with all of the sponsor logos on. So when we have events, those sponsors are recognized. We do slides on monitors at every event that we're at, just like we do here. The gold level sponsors are recognized in a text footer at the bottom of all stories. And again, it's very NPR-like. This Solutions Journalism work is brought to you in part by the generous contributions of you can kind of see how it works. It's very simple, very easy to understand. We created a 4-page PDF document that was one for Gray Matters, one for Solutions Journalism. The back of that document was the same. And we decided that since we were going to tackle 2 projects at once, we were going to keep it very simple. And your sponsorship of Solutions Journalism was you were a partner for both projects. We weren't divvying this up. We wanted to keep it very simple. If you sponsored us on one project, you sponsored us on both. Nope, same price. Again, we're keeping it, everything about this was about being able to cut through any barrier and talk to them about why they cared about the work that we were doing and connect deeply with them and with their values. Just a little bit bigger there. This is the hard part. Make the calls. Be transparent. Ask for the support. And this is where all of you become involved if you want to do this. This is a publisher level sell. No one can articulate the value of your brand better than you. No one knows in their heart and their mind better about the why your organization exists better than the person that has to make payroll. There's no way around this. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to be as comfortable as I am talking to people about advertising sales or that sort of stuff, because you believe in what you are doing. If you're a journalist that's a publisher, you can do this all day long, because please remember, our biggest gift is our ability to tell stories. We are storytellers. You're halfway there. Write your own narrative. So, how did we decide who we were going to ask? This was, again, why your publisher is really critical here. If you are an active publisher in your community, you have a very clear understanding of who has the money, who has a history of being involved in good works in their community, and whose values intersect with the content that you are working on. You know these things. You know who these suspects are. And that's what we did. We looked at 2 factors. Do they have a general history of doing really good work and supporting financially good works in the community? Do they have that general history? Or do they have a very specific intersection with the content that we are investigating? And ideally, both. But we have examples of all 3 options. General good, specific intersection, and both. We had all 3 people participated. The next question is, and your sales and marketing departments will ask you about this, is this going to cannibalize our ad budget? Oh my gosh. Well, so we focused on new money. We specifically targeted organizations that have absolutely no reason to advertise with us. We looked at, for Rising from Rust, we looked at manufacturers. Huge manufacturers that are trying to modernize their buildings. They have a stake in Midwestern economy performance. We immediately curated them. For Gray Matters, we looked at things like the Area Agency on Aging. We're a perfect fit. They have a marketing budget. They want to be associated with good works. This is a perfect fit for them. So we began to build this list. We built a list of probably 60 or 70 people. I gave myself 30 days, and I tracked everything because I wanted to know how this worked, so if it worked, I could do it again. I sent 80 personal emails. I made approximately 100 phone calls, and I had 12 in-person meetings with people, and I raised $72,000. We ended up just sort of stopping early because we were so far past our goal. Go ahead. 11 of the 12. Once we got to a meeting, because we were so, and you know, Kenny from Broad Street would love this because we just used Kenny's method. We just backed into what do we need, who can get us there, and are they aligned? And we walked through that process. It's not easy. You get a lot of no's, but you really get good at telling your story. We did frequent updates with the newsroom. We celebrated every time we got a newsroom partner. It went right into our Slack channel. It was ding, 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 ding. Yeah, we got $5,000 more. They believe in the work that we're doing. We celebrated that. This was not, it didn't exist in my office. It was my job, my singular job was to go get the money. Because I knew that if I went and got the money, everybody else was going to be working their butts off for 12 months. So this was my month to go deep and to deliver. And then we did simple stuff with thank yous. And this so matters. It's so, gratitude so matters in business. It is so important. This runs on a monitor on our wall in our office on repeat every day for the next year. Everyone that comes through our office knows that we are thankful to our partners for supporting solutions journalism. And let me just kind of give you an idea of where they were. So Spherion Manufacturing, their CEO, or their Spherion Employment Agency, their CEO is the president and chair of our local community foundation. Boom, connection, right? The Visiting Nurses Association serves the elder community. Richland Bank and Mechanics Bank are pillar advertisers. They support everything that's good in the community. PR Machine Works, boom, they connected right with Rising from Rust. Nanogate, Rising from Rust. The Area Agency on Aging, Gray Matters. DRM Advertising, they support everything. Ohio Health, Gray Matters and Rising from Rust. They believe in both of them. They just invested $54 million in a facility in Mansfield. They want to see Mansfield succeed. They want to see us address our problems. North Central State College and the Ohio State University campus at Mansfield, they are pillars in the community. They found the money. Hedstrom Manufacturing in neighboring Ashland. The CEO there was a friend of mine. I've known him for 20 years. I walked into his office and I said, you have no reason to advertise with me. I don't want to sell you advertising. You need to write me a check today. And here's why. And I told him the story and I walked out with a check. Because that's what you do. You go in and you tell them, if you truly have drank your own Kool-Aid and you really believe in what you're doing, you walk in and you ask for the damn money. And you leave with it. There's nothing to be ashamed of for being journalists that tell the story of our local communities, a lot of times being the only ones. That is valuable. And imagine the world without you. And I had that dialogue. So I want you to imagine Mansfield without Richland Source. Oh, God, that'd be terrible. That's why you're going to write me a check. Because you should. And they believe it. And they will do it because our values align. RFME Insurance, past president, Community Foundation. J&B Acoustical supports everything. Hess Industries, rising from rust. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is not just theoretical. We've had the situation where we need to, well, we have a page corporate sponsor, and we have to this week report on them.
Yep,
Yeah. Sorry, is that on?
there's a switch on it.
So not just theoretical, right? Okay, that's not working.
There she is.
There we are. You know, this very week, we have to do some reporting involving reporting on one of our corporate sponsors who has been a page sponsor for us for 3 years. We've never had reason to report on them before. They're a fiber internet provider in the city. They ran into a problem in a neighborhood, got into a dispute with the Department of Public Works. I got to report it. If you are doing this, how are you thinking about your reporters thinking about these companies? Because if this is flashing up in the newsroom constantly, as a reporter being told, be grateful, be grateful, be grateful, it's intense, right? When suddenly you've got to do now some objective, serious reporting on something the company may have done problematically.
Right. Great question. Because I lead the Thankful Brigade. Our reporters are independent, and they've already reported tough stories about these companies since they became newsroom partners. And I will tell you that it's not perfect. The answer to the question is it ain't perfect. It's just not. You know, those conflicts happen. They've happened for decades, hundreds of years. As long as our business is supported by outside money, there's going to be outside interests. It just is. It's not perfect. We chose these partners because they respect what we do and they understand the line. And we had that exact conversation, both verbally and in writing, with every single partner before we took their check. They know what the rules are, and it's up to us to enforce them. One more thing from Alice, and then take your question.
Yeah, so what's been interesting for me is because I've had to do now work with this company that's been a supporter for years, they're actually seeing how I do my work. And it turns out that's been really useful because they're seeing
Right.
how I treat them. And I told them, okay, right now you're no longer my corporate sponsor. We have to deal with you as a subject. And this is how we do it. And so I explained to him, this is what counts as on the record. This is what's off the record. This is where I triangulate. This is why there's a delay in the report coming out. And that's actually turned out to be an incredibly useful experience for them because they see how we do it and what it looks like.
Yep.
And I think it's made him more inclined to keep supporting us.
Yeah, and I think that all of you have that credibility. I just think sometimes we all forget that we have it. It's natural. It's okay. We're slaving away and breaking rocks. But you had a question.
Kind of a nuts and bolts question, but I assume that you're not a nonprofit, correct?
We are a for-profit.
You are for profit. What conversations did you have about sort of tax-related issues and
Right.
those kinds of things?
Thanks for asking. I forgot to add that. So nobody got a tax deduction on this either. And we just had to have that conversation. I had several people ask, because it's like, oh, I'd like to write this check to you from my foundation. Or I'd like to write this check to you from my fund at the community foundation. Can I do that? And my answer always had to be, well, sure, I will take whatever check that you want to write. However, you can't, I have to inform you, you can't deduct this from your taxes. So it was just, we had to be upfront about it. We lost, I think I got one no, just like there was a tax-related no, but there were lots of tax-related discussions and lots of yeses. So it was okay. I mean, again, it was all about transparency.
Jane, you mentioned, of course, you're a for-profit business. Can you talk a little bit about how you use that money? You may already be getting to this. I'm jumping ahead, but you've already got your reporters budgeted out and your payroll and things. So how did you take that $72,000 and earmark it for these two projects?
That's a super question, and thank you for that. The way that we explained this to the funders, and it was really important when we did this, was we said, we want you to imagine restricted funds in a nonprofit. This is how we're going to use your money. So we created a separate, in our financials, we created a separate section in the financials that is this fund. It's basically, it exists on our balance sheet. It doesn't filter into our P&L. It's money that's on our balance sheet, but it's not in our P&L. So we don't use it for operations. And then we created a separate tracking sheet. So basically a spreadsheet that all of the funders have access to anytime they want to see it. We track every expense that's related to gray matters or rising from rust. We detail what that expense is, and then on a quarterly basis, we'll go over that with funders if they're interested. Interestingly, never have we once had an inquiry from a funder about how we were using the money. I think that has to do with the fact that they're seeing the work and that they trust us. But trust but verify was a way that we wanted to approach this very proactively. So we built this tracking spreadsheet, and then we also built.
So Jay, real quick,
Yes.
what specific expenses are you talking about when you say you're tracking? How
We'll track-
granular do you get with that?
So we are sending 2 reporters to New York City at the end of this month to go to the conference on the future of aging, because they want to look at how technology is impacting the aging process. And the Atlantic is putting on an incredible one-day show, or incredible one-day Think conference in New York City. So we're tracking all of their travel. So we pay for all of our travel to cover these. If we're buying technology to specifically enable some form of storytelling, we will track that. We do not take employee hours out of it. So we're not like funding employee salaries out of this money, but we're funding all of the things that would go into an employee being able to do this work at a very high level.
So you're not covering their salaries?
No, sir, we are not.
Hello. You mentioned that asking people for money was a skill, and my question is, for those of us who don't have that skill, how can we develop it? Or are you just a natural? Were you in preschool with a media kit? You know, how did you?
That's awesome. I love that. My dad would be so proud to hear you say that. No, I think, I don't think it's, I think if you believe in what you're doing, it's much easier to communicate with people why it matters. And I like to take money out of my initial thought process when I am talking to people about helping them in any way that might involve them transacting with me. I want to know about their story. I want to understand what their objectives are. I want to understand what their values are. I want them to know what mine are or what my companies are, and I want to see if those things align, because sometimes they don't. And if you think about this as just relationships, and you don't get all like bound up in all the 6 steps to successful selling, there's really one step. People have to believe you're not there to steal from them. It's not, and that's just, it just boils down to being trustworthy. And I would imagine, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, that you are highly trustworthy and that you believe in what you're doing. You're 2/3 of the way there. Now you just have to put a few things down on paper and ask somebody. But I'm going to share every single thing, that all of our documents, all of our pitch letters, everything, I'm sharing that with everyone here, and I want you to steal all of our ideas so that you can do this in your newsroom.
Jay, Lance over here.
Yeah.
To follow up on what Dylan said, it's really interesting to me that you created a separate item on your balance sheet. But if you're not using this to pay reporters, or any of that, there's no way in the world you're spending $72,000 on this. So is this just something that's going to live on your balance sheet? Obviously, you spent something.
Right.
How do you, nobody's asked, but if somebody asked and there's still $54,000 there, what do you say?
What we do is, that's a great question. And one thing that we do with that from an employee perspective is that sometimes this work requires us to bring on subcontractors so that we can allow our full-time employees to do that work. So we're currently paying a couple of subcontractors that are helping to feed the beast, and that's eating into that, right? I mean, and so that is going. But what we wanted to assure our funders was, this is not funny money that is going into some operational slush fund that you are not going to, that your money is going to go to us paying to cover a high school football game. And it was just, we worked really hard to build separation, and we probably hamstrung ourselves a little, but we're willing to live with that. Now, just to touch base back on that, we also created a simple form that if a newsroom employee wants to expend from that fund, they file a requisition. They hate paperwork, everyone does, but we ask them to justify, let's have a paper trail. So there's a signature from the managing editor and the publisher that says, yep, I approved this $5,000 to do this with this as it relates to this project. Again, it's all about funder confidence because we want to be able to do this over and over again. This is a simple gratitude thing that I think a lot of people forget. We printed up these little certificates. We made them in Canva. So it took us all of about a half an hour to make these certificates. We made them in Canva. We printed them. We went to Hobby Lobby. We bought frames, or wherever we bought the frames from, or Amazon, or wherever we did. The managing editor signed it, I signed it, and every member of our newsroom signed it, and we hand-delivered them to every one of the newsroom partners. Got in our cars and went, we wrapped them, wrote a card, signed the card, and delivered them to every one of our newsroom partners. And now when I go into their offices, I see them. They're on their walls, they're on their desk. It meant a lot to them, and it cost us nothing. And it cemented this relationship of respect and trust in local media.
Got another question here, Jay.
Go for it.
I'm from Norway, and so this is very, very interesting because this is not done in Norway in this fashion. There are some online publishers that are asking for contributions, but nothing like this. And the first thing I'm thinking is how, if one of your donors or whatever you want to call them, your partners, suddenly you're working on a big story which involves something they have done. How can you say to your readers, I have the journalistic integrity even if they have given me all this money into this? How do you? I think that would be a huge issue in Norway.
It might be, and we talked about that. And so this is our escape hatch. It hasn't happened. I don't think it's going to happen because we curated these funders based, their values are shared with us. It's unlikely that any of them are going to be caught committing a felony. However, it could happen. And we are prepared to completely write them a check back. So if it came to that, and we knew that we had to divest ourselves of that particular newsroom partner in order to clear that hurdle, we are absolutely prepared to completely eliminate that from our balance sheet. I mean, we talked about that because our newsroom was very concerned. They're like, what's the nuclear option? And we came up with it. Is there any other questions? I'm happy to take them. We have one right over here, Dylan.
Hello, my name is Liv. I'm also from Norway.
Hi.
And I was thinking about the same as my colleague here asked. Congratulations on your project. It was really awesome to see that video. Inspiring. And also, I'm engaged in a project trying to present solution journalism in Norway. We are inspired from Denmark also. It's called Konstruktiv Journalistikk.
Yes, yeah, I follow it, yes.
So, these days, it's not common. I can't come to think of any example that news journalism has been sponsored from the private sector. And my question is also, one thing is that you can say, well, you might have your money back, but how do you build the trust in the public and secure them that your journalism is objective?
I don't know the phrase to answer that. It's almost like trying to prove a negative in the sense that I think we were able to raise this money to support our journalism because the readers have a history of trust with us. I think that that had to come before we did this. I don't think we could have done this 4 years ago. We're only 5 years old. I don't think we could have done that. I think the work that we did on an absolute shoestring that was laser focused on the reason why we exist enabled us to open the doors to be able to say, this is what we have done, this is what we want to do, we need you to help us get there. And I didn't see a lot of difference, and this is just my own personal view of taking money to support journalism with the right guardrails in place. I didn't see a tremendous difference between a trustworthy private business who I knows has the right ethics and respects mine than it is taking money from the Knight Foundation. It doesn't feel that much different to me. It's all about guardrails and some dividers and transparency and understanding and trust. And if you can start there, you can deal with the nuclear option. Like if you have to blow it up, you can. But if you do it in the right way and you protect that core of we have to be independent in order to do our work, I think, I'll take that bet. If I'm 95% sure I'm going to be okay, I'll take that every day of the week.
Well, we're already running.
And I'm probably well over time. I'm sorry.
Quite a bit long. No, it's great. And
So
it's great that there are so
this-
many hands shown. But
this link will take you guys to that short. I made it a short link so it's easy enough to get to, but it'll take you to a shared Google Drive folder that has all of our pitch documents, examples of the slides that you saw, some sample email templates that you could use if you wanted to adapt those to your business. Because I would love to come back next year and see that somebody else was able to successfully adapt this program and raise $172,000 for their journalism. I mean, so the challenge has been laid, right? 73 is the winning number. You guys go get it. Thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much,
it.
Jay. You're going to be around at lunch, right, Jay? So the people who are raising their hands can hit you up still. You're going to be around at lunch, so the people who are raising their hands can still hit
I'll be around for a little bit. Yep, I got to head home right around lunch, but I will be around for a little bit. Thanks. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you, sir. So now we've got a few moments for a quick word from one of our sponsors, Empower Local. Come on up, guys.
Hi, my name is Stephen Berman. Can you guys hear me? All right? No? It's okay. Try to project my voice a little bit. I'm here with my partner, Corey Little. We've been in local publishing for 7 years, and this is my second year at Lion, and I think probably most of us agree that this is a tremendous asset. If you're independent and you feel on your own and you're trying to serve your community, to have this community get together once a year to support one another and to share knowledge and resources. Corey and I are publishers ourselves. I come from a background, 7 years ago I started a technology and data company that's focused on enabling local discovery. We developed an iPhone app that would show you everything from civic events to volunteering events to festivals and live shows at the hyperlocal level, but based on your interests, and leveraging data to help people discover what's important to them. That's why we came up with the name Wanna Do, like what do you want to do? I did actually, in building a technology platform, also develop a local community. Our first community was Wanna Do Nashville. We had 40,000 subscribers to that community, and we did the whole balance of content, development, community engagement, monetizing, and trying to monetize in a way that respects your community. And I know the pain of trying to make the balance sheet work. My co-founder in Empower Local is Corey Little, who is the founder of Williamson Source and Rutherford Source, and also Bigger Media, which brought an agency in to help deliver value to brands within the context of community news. And 5 months ago, we started a new company. It acquired all of our other publications, but also our agency and Wonderduce Technology. And we've started to focus on 3 key ways that we think we can make a difference in local publishing without being redundant. Those 3 ways are content automation, right, that can save you time, valuable content that you can automate on your site, save you time, user management and data that allows you to be more personalized, not only with user experiences that increase engagement, but also some of your marketing activities. And then finally, brand sponsorships that are outside of your market and where we believe, I think everyone would agree, that some of the national brands can be great partners, right? But they're not necessarily talking to us if we can't get their attention. So we're trying to advocate on behalf of and organize local publishers so that we can bring high quality brand engagement into these local communities. So I'm just going to quickly just show you, kind of dive into those 3 areas in 3 slides. Right now we have an automated events calendar that can power content anywhere on your site and any kind of content from volunteering or civic or town halls to all the shows, right? And one of the things that this allows you to do is create all kinds of new content sections that maybe you didn't think about before. Do you want an outdoor adventure section on your site? Or is your new site more focused on community, so you want governmental related events? But the key here is that content's automated. You don't have to think about it, but you can supplement it with writing, and you can supplement it with sponsorships. The other 2 points on the screen here is accuracy and image rich. This isn't just technology. It's about 80% powered by a feed engine that we developed, but it's mostly mapping and organizing around your content goals. And then we do qualify and ensure great images, well-tagged information, and accurate information. So, and I think that that's key when you're dealing with events. If you have misspellings and inaccurate information, it looks as if you don't actually know your community. So as far as the personal experience, the tool that we have right now is on your site, asking your readers, would you like to see recommendations for articles and stories or for events? And what we found over the years is that really gives someone immediate value to sign up with you, to become a member, right? So now they can start saving content, articles and events on your site, even offers and promotions, but they can immediately see recommendations that are distilled down to their interests. That person becomes a subscriber, and also their interests are now part of their profile in your MailChimp or whatever email service you use. So you have the ability to start segmenting and giving people more relevant email, and also grow that email faster, your email list faster. And then finally, the last couple months, we've started to work with larger brands in Middle Tennessee as we've gotten large enough to get their attention. But now we've started to talk to some of our existing customers and start new conversations to say, would you like access to community sites that look like these in other parts of the US? And we're hearing yes, tell us more, what does this look like? So right now we've got to have sort of the double-sided part of this formula is who here wants to be part of that network and that we can start to represent and advocate, and then organizing more brands beyond the ones that we have here on the screen, to start creating high-quality campaigns that are not disruptive, but actually can create additional value for your readers. So we really would appreciate, we've been in this fight for a long time. We're very sincere and sometimes a little too earnest, but we would really appreciate you guys stopping by the booth, and I can show you how some of this works. I think sometimes it's more powerful to see it, but we also have a questionnaire, and even if you don't take the time to fill out the questionnaire, just telling us will help us start to steer this ship in the right direction. So we look forward to an ongoing conversation with you guys. You can reach me at Steven@empowerlocal.com, but also here's the place where you can just spend a minute and a half and tell us a little bit more about your goals. Thanks.
Up next, we've got a panel discussion with 3 publishers who are going to talk a little bit about how to do events.
Yep.
Right, Lance?
Yep.
You guys want some chairs, or you want to stand? How do you want to do it?
I'm happy to stand.
Some chairs over there.
Rather than people moving chairs.
Okay.
So we've planned this intricately. Just be prepared.
There's no bar down here, which makes it difficult. Okay, thank you. Not really.
Is it hiding?
So, yeah. So while we're waiting for the presentations to go, how many people here run any events from their sites? How many who haven't had their hands up are interested in it?
Oh, you know where it's showing.
Okay, a lot.
Hold on.
Why don't we, while we're waiting for this, each of us introduce ourselves and talk about our event a little bit, and then we'll show something? Go ahead.
I'm Dawn Shelton in Luther, Oklahoma with the Luther Register. And, when I joined Lion, and probably saw in Columbia, I probably saw in our Lion's Den, a way for us to make money was to do events, and that was deep in my background. So, okay, let's do an event. And we have a small town, very small town that was kind of dying. It's kind of not a Rust Belt story, but you watch the movie Cars, a Route 66 story. So we wanted a reason to bring folks into town, so we came up with a pecan festival because we had one little orchard in town, but the whole state came to see her. And we thought it was a way to grab folks who were already coming and give them another reason to stay in our town. And so one thing led to another, and we had the first one last year right after this conference, and I was a basket case here last year. I'm less of a basket case, but I just answered 3 Pecan Festival emails while I was sitting back there. Yeah, there's our deal. I love it. It didn't get the love that I thought it would. I think it's so cute. This is, well, it's not me. I wish it was me because she's skinny. But a local artist did this. I got her Christmas card, and she had done this with her family in her living room. And it just looked like our main street to me. So this has been our art for this year. It's not going on the T-shirt. This little square's going on the T-shirt. But last year, we planned for 1,000 people to come to our town. And we, depending on how much I want to brag, we say 7,000 came, but mostly we say 5,000 to 7,000 people came. The weather was horrible. This north wind came through in the night. Tents went flying. The police officer and I were running down the street getting tents in the middle of the night. And it was freezing. I'm still cold if I think about it. Because, of course, I didn't dress properly because I know I don't have anyone to dress me.
So I have 2 questions for you.
Yeah.
One, why didn't you bring any pecans to this?
Because I traveled light. Because they're not ready yet in
Okay.
Oklahoma.
It's November 18th.
We are doing a harvest festival.
And
When I looked at pecan festivals all over, they were all in the summer, and I'm all, outdoor festivals in the summer? No. Well, not where it's
So the
hot.
second is, how do you make money?
I make money. The first year, people would not give me money to do Luther Register because Jay just helped me know I wasn't good at my why and my own belief. But I could sell a festival. So people forked over money to me, forked over thousands of dollars in sponsorships. And so that was very smooth. Sponsorships were great. The word got out. I don't know if food trucks are a thing where everyone is. Oklahoma's a little behind, maybe, I don't know. But food trucks, man, are a thing, and those people need places to go set up. And so we are intentionally keeping the market tight, and I'm telling you, I deny a food truck every single day. So
And is
next
it-
year, I'm
is
going to
it-
charge more for them.
Is it a free festival?
And it's a free festival. So revenue is sponsorship, food trucks pay me, artists pay me. And that's, and then.
And
all
how
the
much do you
expenses.
charge for sponsorship?
Sponsorship was a tiered, you know, we had the pecan partner and the gold, bronze, whatever we called it. I should have brought that too. It's all in there in lutherpecanfestival.com.
But if I want to be a pecan partner, how much does it cost me?
$2,000, $2,500 for presenting sponsor, and $2,000 for sustaining, and then $15,000, and then a bunch of 250s and a couple 500s, and I customized a few.
And do you obey Jay's rule of create scarcity, or
Yeah.
are you happy to
Yeah.
create 50 sponsors?
Almost gone, well, I'm going to say we're scarcity, but I'm going to bring them in the back door.
Okay.
Like the food trucks. No, not really. Yeah, I love the scarcity option. Oh, yeah. So that's our.
Speaking to them.
That is our income. Also helped me get known in the community. She's that crazy festival girl who also does the newspaper. And then a wider audience. Here's our numbers, our event performance on Facebook. Y'all, our town has 1,200 people. So that's who says they're coming, whether they do or not. And then this is a snap of our Instagram deal. So I'm driving on social media, Insta, and the Facebook event page. And last year, don't do this, I separated Pecan Fest from LutherRegister.news. I just wanted, you know, a wall there so I can be serious journalist over here, event planner over here, but it didn't work. I'm just proudly saying this year, this is a production of my newspaper. We are doing these events quality, professionally, kindly, and it's helping our, you know, our mutual purpose to help our town. So I brought the Pecan Festival website under my new website that Ramp helped me fund. Thank you, Lion. And that's that. So y'all come if you want. There will be pecans. That was our biggest complaint last year. We ran out.
Should I go next? I'm Lance from Berkeley side. 6 years ago, we started our Ideas Festival. We did it for, I guess, 3 reasons. One was we wanted another stream of revenue, obviously. Second was we thought one of the things that really distinguishes Berkeley is ideas. Obviously, there's world-famous university, but there's also an incredible tradition of political thinking, of leadership and environment, in the arts. Berkeley was where community policing was invented. The police chief in the 1920s, a guy named August Vollmer, was the first police chief to, you know, say our police should be, you know, community police. So there are all these different areas where this little city has really exhibited leadership over the decades, and we thought, what would be a more natural place to do an Ideas Festival than Berkeley? And also, you know, we're a place where sort of nostalgia weighs heavily, and I don't think that's a healthy thing. So we wanted to do something that was about looking forward. It's not, hey, Berkeley, remember the 60s. It's, you know, there are exciting things happening. We can draw people from all over the country to think about the future. It was last weekend. So these were the 40 or so, please don't go on, the 40 or so speakers who we had. You know, about half the speakers are from the Bay Area, half are not, in all sorts of different areas. So, you know, Zara Bilou up there in the corner is the head of the Council on American Islamic Relations. Ayad Akhtar is a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright. Brittany Cooper is a fabulous feminist thinker. Allison Hobbs is a historian at Stanford. Bonnie Jenkins was an ambassador in the Obama administration working on sort of global threats. Scott Wiener is a state senator. Sinead Griffin is a amazing postgraduate scientist at Berkeley Lab, and on and on and on. So it's all sorts of different areas. Now you can go to the next one. This, you probably can't see, but this is kind of what it looks like. There's Brittany. It's all about conversations, no panels. I'm very happy to be on a panel up here, but generally, I hate panels because I don't think they are as interactive and spontaneous as they should be. So it's about 2 people talking. So there's Brittany. Otis Cooper is a columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle, and so he was sort of interviewing Brittany, and we had a great image up on the screen. That's Audre Lorde, a great poet, with a powerful image. Let's go to the next. Here you can see people listening intently. We very much make it, it's a festival, not a conference, so lots of chances for people to mingle and have fun, and we've got food and drink. There's the party. I think that's probably all the slides I had to just give you a sense of it. I loved what you said about not having a separate identity. We have made that mistake. When we created it in 2013, we thought, well, Berkeley Side is always going to be just about Berkeley, so let's have a brand that would be broader. So we came up with this idea of Uncharted. We're now trying to infuse Berkeley Side everywhere in it because we want it to be seen as part of Berkeley, and Berkeley Side has a powerful brand. We don't feel we're geographically limited. It costs a lot of money. Unlike running an online news site, there are real costs. You have cost of venues, you have cost of catering, you have marketing costs. It's a lot of work, a lot of cost, but we get kind of along Jay's lines of find new money. Most of our sponsors, and that's where we make our money, much more than ticket sales, most of our sponsors are people that would never advertise with us. We do very, very well, for example, with property developers who, to be frank, want to be friends with Berkeley Side, but they're never going to advertise. They have nothing to advertise. They're the developers behind projects. So they're happy to give us $5,000 or $10,000 to support our festival. There are a couple of technology companies that have supported us that, again, would never have a reason to advertise on Berkeley Side, but we're supporting the idea that the Bay Area is this crucible of thinking and innovation, so that's something they can get on board with. The Levi Strauss Foundation has become a big sponsor of us because they care enormously about diversity in the community, and that's one of the big themes for us often. So it's been a great way to pull in new money. But as I say, my caution is it's a lot of work, and there are real costs.
But this is an event staff, what you do. And what's your big number budget? It sounds like a 6-figure plus.
No, we do it pretty efficiently. Our costs are about $70,000 or $80,000, but this year our revenues were about $120,000. So, it's a contributor.
Do you have event staff, or are you?
So I'm deeply involved. Actually, I gave you 2 reasons. One was we wanted new revenue, to diversify our revenue. We thought Berkeley was a place of ideas. The third reason is, in my background, I've done a lot of big conferences. If you've heard of this thing called Davos, the World Economic Forum, back in the day I ran the Davos program. So I have a lot of experience in this area. So it was applying that experience. And I have a co-curator who is a contractor. We pay her. I'm an old white guy. She's a young black woman. And that has been incredibly important to us because, kind of deep down we believe, diversity matters and different minds are going to think differently. The experience over the last 3 years of working really closely with Helena has shown that to me so many times over. It's been fantastic, and it really shows in our program. We hire, like there are people at the back here running the tech, we do that. I have a guy I pay to be a kind of project manager to run the logistics. So that's, the big costs are venues, catering, and some staff.
Yes, so thank you, Lion. Those who are journalists and event planners, it kind of gets in our systems, but we know what you have done to do this for us this weekend, so thank you.
And a little side note, East Lansing's Alice Drager 3 years ago before she started her journalism project in East Lansing, came to Uncharted as a speaker because she wrote this fabulous book about sort of science and gender and, you know, how many, I mean, it's a long time ago that I read it, Alice, but, you know, how kind of misguided so much of the thinking was and the sort of coverage of these issues. And so we had a great, I said it's all about conversation. I interviewed Alice on stage, and it was one. Inspired me. There you go. So that it all, everything connects. Let's hear about Cascade.
Yeah. So
Just share the mic.
you want to pick us that? No. Yes.
There you go.
This is working. Okay. All right. So I'm Greg Hanscom. I am the executive editor at Crosscut, or that's how I introduce myself. Story is actually a little more complicated than that. Crosscut was one of the early online news, local news operations. Started back in 2007 as a for-profit. Went nonprofit 2 years after that, and sort of bumped along for a total of about 8 years. Stayed small. When I showed up in 2015, there were 12 people in that newsroom, but most of them were interns or volunteers or people who had just wandered in off the street. I think we had 4.5 FTEs at the time. 4 months after I arrived, we merged with the local public television station, KCTS 9. So we're now under the umbrella of a single nonprofit organization called Cascade Public Media. We have, I now oversee the entire newsroom, combined newsroom of television producers, video producers, and writers and editors. And we have really pivoted the entire organization toward local public interest journalism. We're building out our newsroom. We will have, by the end of this calendar year, we will have 30 people working in that newsroom. And we are out to prove that we're making a good bet here. You know, we're putting a lot of resources towards our journalism, and I think there are a lot of other PBS stations and NPR stations around the country that are kind of looking to build a future for themselves. We're out to prove that journalism is a good bet, but we got a lot of work to do. We do a lot of events, and now this was true before the merger, and it continues to be true. We do everything from trivia nights at our local breweries to community idea labs, where we bring people together to tackle issues ranging from, you know, Seattle's terrible traffic to the projected onslaught of climate refugees to the Pacific Northwest. We've had
just in time for the volcano.
Or the earthquake, which is coming any day, right? We've done art salons exploring big issues like racism and gentrification. There was a fourth one up there I just wanted to mention. Oh, and every year we do a big election night party. This is my team trying to actually produce election results in the midst of this mayhem.
That's great.
So we spend a lot of time out in the community, and this is because we want to be present in the community. We think this is where we get a lot of our best story ideas. It's also a great source of revenue, and that's what I want to talk about mostly. 2 big events that we do to generate revenue. So you can do the next one. So the one that we've been doing now for 6 years is called the Courage Awards. We're a nonprofit. And this is kind of our version of what you would find in a city magazine as like the city's most influential people feature. So every year we actually kind of poll our readers for people who are doing fantastic work around the community in a bunch of different areas. So we do a Lifetime Achievement Award. We talk about courage in business and technology, courage in culture, elected official, and then courage in public service. It's a way to celebrate some of the well-known luminaries in the community. We celebrated Dan Evans, a former governor, this year with the Lifetime Achievement Award. But it's also a way to sort of surface the new talent and the new energy that's kind of emerging in the city. It's also a fantastic way to get people out to have breakfast with you at 7 o'clock in the morning on a rather dreary October October day. So and make some money. So this year, I'm putting this up here. This is just sort of a look at what we charge our corporate sponsors for the Courage Awards. You can see that it ranges from $5,000 up to $25,000. To give you a sense of how much money we raise just for the Courage Awards, and again, this is a one-morning breakfast event. This year, we grossed about $150,000 in the morning. That included about $75,000 in corporate sponsorships, $50,000 in gifts the morning of the event, and then the rest, about $25,000, was from ticket sales. I'm happy to share all of our sales decks with you guys so you can see sort of how we build these things and what we charge. The second event, which is very much like the Berkeley side event, I think, is we call it Seattle's answer to the New Yorker Festival or the Aspen Ideas Festival. Truth is that we stole most of our ideas from the Texas Tribune. Evan Smith of the Texas Tribune has been tremendously helpful in organizing the Crosscut Festival. We did our first one last year. It was completely seat of the pants. The programming was my kind of night and weekend job. We had a fantastic events organizer who did the groundwork. But it took the entire community to put this on, meaning the entire Cascade Public Media staff, plus a lot of volunteer labor. We have a young professionals board for Crosscut. They were out in force, organized the big closing night party for this thing. But you can see that we kind of built this thing around a handful of big names. This is straight from Evan Smith and the Texas Tribune. We got Julian Castro, rising star in the Democratic Party. We got the governors of Washington and Oregon. We got the mayors of Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver, BC. We got police chiefs from around the country to get together and talk about police reform. It was an action-packed sort of day and a half, conversations. It was panels, one-on-one interviews, you name it. Drew about 1,000 people out on another dreary day, this one in February. And next year it's going to be even bigger. We've actually moved it to May. We hope the weather will be a little bit better. And we're going to approximately double the size of this thing. First year with the Crosscut Festival, and you can actually, one more slide. You can see here what we charged for sponsorship or what we're charging this year. First year with the Crosscut Festival, we grossed $250,000. That was about half of that came from foundations. About a third of that came from corporate sponsors, and then the rest came from ticket sales. We gave away a ton of tickets. We gave away a lot of tickets, especially to students, to get young people out to the conference. I'm happy to share any and all of our information. I can just send you the decks that we built for sales.
Question here. Wait for a mic.
Hi, yeah, as a nonprofit, you're now nonprofit media. As a nonprofit, are you asking people to come out and participate in this festival, or are you paying them? Because that's been one of the concerns that I've had in attracting the best people is, do I ask them? Because I'm for-profit currently, moving over to nonprofit, but I'm like, do I ask them to participate? Would that insult them, or am I being prepared to pay them?
So on this one, I follow Evan Smith's lead on this. Evan's sort of mantra is pay no one.
I agree 1,000%. Never, ever, ever, ever get into paying speaker fees. It'll kill you.
Yeah.
Never, ever.
Yeah. Now,
never, ever.
We made a couple of exceptions to this. We pay, so we don't have enough journalists to sort of lead the number of conversations that we held throughout the day. So we ended up bringing in journalists. We included, this was very collaborative, we included journalists from all over town, Seattle Times, local NPR stations, you name it. They volunteered, but if there were journalists who were coming into town to conduct interviews or moderate panels, we would cover their travel costs. We had sponsors we had Alaska Airlines, for example, was one of our corporate sponsors. They were able to provide free airline tickets to some of our bigger names. And then another exception that we will make is people who are unable to take part in this event for financial reasons from the community oftentimes. If it's an artist who's up, displaying their work or performing, we're going to pay them a small fee. We're not out to rip people off. We believe strongly that it's in the interest of a lot of these public officials in particular to come out and speak to their public. And I think that was a big case that we made. But
I see that on public officials, but you had people who make money speaking. How did you not pay them?
I'm very convincing.
And why would they do it?
Often people want to sell books. We have a pop-up bookstore, and so seriously, that's an attraction. People like coming to the Bay Area. We pay flights and accommodation, that we do, of course. People like the idea of being somewhere where there's an attentive, engaged audience for their ideas. I really, and performers, when we have musicians and things like that, we give them, a sort of honorarium. But there is, a market, very sophisticated market for speakers. And there are unquestionably some speakers who are no pay, no play. You just have to accept those aren't going to be your speakers. Then that's fine. And what we found in terms of content is this is an incredibly imperfect market. The market inefficiencies are enormous, and part of a key market inefficiency is if you are a person of color or a woman, you are probably not valued at all in the market for speakers. And so if you recall our list of speakers, we have a lot of women and a lot of people of color. We don't have a lot of old white guys. And that's partly by choice, because old white guys have had plenty of opportunity to say things, myself included. But also because a lot of the old white guys are on the pay me $60,000 and I'll show up circuit, and that's not for us.
What do you think about that, girls?
So I changed my mind because you actually answered the question when you started talking about how you get people to attend. I know the Texas Tribune model really well as a former Austinite. That thing is off the hook all the time. But, and I understand each of you has something different kind of based on your brand. So Berkeley would do Brittany Cooper, would be perfect. And Brittany Cooper may not play as well in Luther, but you've got the Pecan Festival, so each of you understands your brand. I guess the thing that I'm curious about most with Cascade is this. Seattle is one of those spaces where people go and their ideas. How do you make yours more competitive or stand out, especially the festival part?
Strangely enough, I think our festival was fairly unique to Seattle. There wasn't anything quite like this that people were doing at the time. We also, our first one launched in the spring, and this was following the 2016 election. There was a tremendous hunger out there to get together and talk through the issues, talk through the politics, talk through the big issues we were facing as a nation and as a community. We build it as kind of journalism in action. You were watching journalists carry out conversations and tough conversations oftentimes on stage. And we put a tremendous amount of energy into creating diverse panels and conversations, spotlighting voices that Seattleites don't often hear from. So that was big.
We've got time for a couple more quick questions, if there are any hands to be raised.
have a question for the Pecan Festival. What's your relationship with the owner of the pecan orchard, grove? What is it? Is it an orchard?
It could be an orchard or a grove. It's the Couch Pecan Orchard, and thanks, Glenn. It's fine. I will. If we were going to start a festival in the town and it was going to take off and it was going to be this big, looking back, I might not have chose the Pecan Festival. I mentioned there's one 10-acre orchard. We sold her out. It drove her crazy. She almost collapsed from exhaustion. That's what she tells me every time she sees me. And she's usually, you open November 15. We have our festival the first Saturday after that, and she closes on New Year's Eve, December 31. She closed December 1 after the festival. But she did not like that. And so this year she hauled me to the orchard, and we sat in her pickup with no air conditioning, and she yelled at me. She didn't want me to have it again. We shouldn't do it. We should do it at another time. You know, all these scenarios, and I just kept saying, well, I have my organizing committee, and we say, no, we're having it, but we're going to invite more pecans to come. No, I don't want you to do that either, because then they're not my pecans. They might be substandard, and then you'll cost me sales. And I'm all, Diane, we are going to be friends through this, and we are going to stay friends, and we are going to work it out. You sell your pecans. We will laud you, support you, lift you up as the best pecan grower in the world, or at least in Oklahoma. And we're going to invite some other pecan growers. So I found a pecan orchard that has actually has a marketing gal on staff. She's a new Agora communication major from Oklahoma State University. We have those. She's on fire. Of course, we made fast friends. She's coming. She's promoting us. I'm promoting her. Another orchard's coming. They're bringing 1,200 pounds. I think we're fine. And our kind of sassy hashtag is #MorePecans this year, because we did. And also, we had no idea. We had no earthly idea the thirst for pecans that there was. It was insane.
How many pies?
I'm sorry, Matt, we didn't bring any because they would have been from the freezer, and it's pre-harvest.
And how many pies?
We, every restaurant in town made 30 to 50 pies. We had some food vendors with pies. They were all sold out before lunch. People love pecans.
So, this is hilarious. But I'm almost asking folks to sort of brainstorm with me a little bit here. I run a statewide vertical. I run North Carolina Health News. And I think about the way that there's an inherent advantage for folks who have a local, like, you know, who are much more local, like Jay with Richland County and you folks with your municipalities. Like, I'm sort of like trying to get my head around, like, how do I run an event? You know, when I'm trying to talk to 10.3 million people in a state that's 450 miles wide and 150, right?
I'd point you back to the Texas Tribune Festival, and Tribune, if you don't know it, is really tightly focused on politics, right? So it's a vertical, it's statewide. Partnered in the early years with a university to host it. That's another trick that we took from them. We partnered with Seattle University. Universities want this kind of event and this kind of energy there. But I bet you could pull together some of the bigger names in health policy and healthcare in the state and build something specifically around that. Partner with a university that wants to host it and bring people in from around.
We've also done smaller events. This Tuesday night, we're having a down ballot candidate forum in town at a restaurant. You know, governor, they get all the attention, but who's going to be my state rep? What about the county commissioner? Come on out, and they're all coming. And so that just kind of focused in. I just cover one community. But you could see what's hot or what people need to know, and then, you know, because we're all arrogant, we all know what everyone needs to know, and so they need to somehow know what I know, so I'm going to invite them to town, and we're going to put it on Facebook Live.
But I actually, there's some areas where, you know, it's great for us to be focused on our city. For an event, I'd much rather be in your position of being statewide, much rather, because you've got a larger potential audience to go for. You've got a larger set of potential sponsors to go for. You know, obviously you're going to have to pick a place, and, you know, events are physically located, so you're going to have to pick a place for that. But you know, I think you shouldn't think that that's a disadvantage. I think it's a huge advantage, providing, you know, just as, you know, for our sites, you know, the key is, you know, what is the compelling content? You know, the same thing is true here. You know, if you can come up with compelling live content, you know, you could do something great, I would think, on healthcare.
Okay, we have
for
to
your
cut.
state.
We have to cut you off. We have to cut you off. Sorry.
Because I'm going back to Seattle to start a pecan festival
Yes,
and
we're
a
little
community
bit
baby
behind
shower.
So while we get Carmen's slides up and we have Carmen come up here, let me introduce the three people who are going to give quick lightning talks. Remember the format yesterday, and I think we'll get back on track with the schedule and get lunch done on time and everything. So Carmen Noble took over earlier this year at the Shorenstein Center at Harvard's Kennedy Business School. Shorenstein, she can tell you more, but it's the Journalist Resource Program, and she's going to talk about the intersection of reporting and academia and studies and stuff like that. And they do these great, you guys, in your handouts, you got some great reporting tips on a couple topics from them. Steve Waldman, who is a Lion Advisory Board member back there, is going to talk about Report for America, and that's another one where there's some money you guys could get, potentially. And then Connor Lynch from University of Missouri School of Journalism is going to talk about a program that they have there where they're teaching journalism students how to sell advertising and think entrepreneurially. And then Randy Pitt, the director of the Reynolds Journalism Institute at Mizzou, is going to talk about another opportunity for members to be able to work with those students a little bit. So, Carmen?
Okay, can you guys hear me okay? Oh, yeah. All right, I lost my voice this morning, so bear with me. So I'm Carmen Noble. I'm the program director of, as Matt said, Journalist Resource at the Shorenstein Center for Media, Politics, Public Policy at Harvard Kennedy School. And I'm going to be talking about tips for reporting on research. And quickly, Journalist Resource started several years ago with the idea that academic research can be a very good source for journalists, especially in a time when journalists are very crunched resource-wise, often are tasked with writing about something or reporting on something they know very little about. And in the meantime, there are lots and lots of researchers who spend their lives studying a very, very particular topic, are focused on publishing in a very particular journal that not a lot of people read. So we're trying to bridge the gap between academia and journalists. And what I'm realizing is that academic researchers are solutions journalists and just don't realize they are. They're focused on looking for a solution with very good data, and just not thinking journalistically or about reaching a mass audience, because that's not what their bosses want them to do. So quickly, this is what our site looks like right now. It's not the whole thing, because I couldn't get a whole screenshot, but we have, the main thing we do is summarize research studies that are relevant to public policy topics, doing research roundups. Like you'll see we have one, I'm gonna look behind me, because so, yeah, it's in front of me. I just have terrible eyes. So when the Kavanaugh story was coming out and the Me Too story was coming out, the question kept coming out, why wouldn't people report on sexual assault when it happened? Why would they wait so many years? And would people really do that? So we looked at what the research said on that. And there were, I think, like 50 research studies on that topic specifically. And whatever reporters found 10 of the best and summarized them, and the answers were kind of shocking and horrible. I encourage you to look this up. We also at the Shorenstein Center have we have a semester-long fellowships that bring in some of the best journalists in the world, and we're taking the opportunity to interview them. So we just talked to Marina Hinojosa, who's the head of Latino USA at NPR, is with us for the semester. And we now have tip sheets for her uncovering immigrants in the immigrant community. Okay, so to get to tips, tip number one, I kind of cover this, I want to make the point that academic research is a really fantastic reporting tool. And one thing I hadn't thought about till I got there is it's a really good way of holding public officials accountable. So if a mayor announces a new policy, you can look to the academic research and say, have other cities implemented policies like this, and have they worked or have they not? The soda tax is one example. We have a tip sheet looking at whether soda taxes work and whether other types of taxes are more effective. One research study found that taxing sugar is actually more effective than taxing soda. Tip number two, this is the easiest way to find research papers fast. People often make the mistake of trying to just to do a regular Google search to find research, and it's a lot more effective to go to scholar.google.com. Tip number three, if you go to scholar.google.com and find a research paper, you'll often find that it's behind a journal's firewall. And people often just say, I can't read it, it's behind a firewall, I'm going to give up. The best thing to do is just reach out to the researcher whose email address is usually on the sheet that you'll see before you get to the firewall, and ask for a copy. Even though their research is published in a journal, they're totally allowed to do that copyright-wise more often than not. And it's rare that people ask them for their studies, so they're excited to talk about it. Tip number four, a study is not a study is not a study. And you see in the news often a study says this. A working paper is a study that has just come out but has not been published in a journal or vetted through a peer review process. And more often than not, that's the study you'll see in the news. It doesn't mean it's a bad study, but you should know that it hasn't been vetted. If study's been published in a journal, you know that it's at least been critiqued by seasoned scholars. So even if you don't have the skills to decide whether it's good or bad research, you know that some experts did. Tip number five, when writing about research, academics tend to bury the lead. So if you look at a research paper, you'll often see a summary at the top, an abstract, and assume that this is going to give you the nut graph, or at least the main findings. That's rarely the case. Usually the abstract does not highlight the findings, and the news is usually hidden somewhere on page 15. It says findings is usually where you'll find that. And the practical relevance of the research is often saved for the conclusion, which is at the end. So it's sort of the inverted pyramid reverted. And here's an example of a research paper where you found the news on page 15 that showed, and it was a study on looking at donations to local school board elections and finding that a huge percentage of them came from large individual outside donors, like Reed Hastings of Netflix. But you wouldn't have known that unless you kept reading the paper. Tip number 6, and this is something I've noticed since I've gotten to the Shorenstein Center. Often news stories will just say, studies have shown that. And to researchers, that's akin to reporting that some people said that without actually citing the actual source. So they asked me to ask you that you at least say where the study came from or who conducted the study, or talking about whether it's a big body of research or just one thing that one study said. Tip number 7, note the limitations of a study when you're reporting on it and point them out. And researchers, I'm found, are some of the most honest people I know, which is why it's fun to interview them. They'll always make sure that, it's not this, it's that, and it's sometimes true in this particular case. And the main example is that often studies have a small sample size, and the researchers are honest about that, but you'll often see news stories make a blanket statement about something and then realize that this was a study of 50 people, and you can't make generalizations about the whole world when you're talking about 50 people. And it just makes your story more honest if you're clear about the specifics of the study. Tip number 8, and this is a big peeve among academics, of confusing causation with correlation. So one example is you see all these studies of if you drink red wine, then you're going to live a longer life. And then the next study says, actually, no, if you drink red wine, then you won't live a longer life. And that's because of the sample size and the population study. But the easiest thing to do is to say that something is linked to something. So in this population, yes, these people drank red wine and ended up living a long life, but that doesn't mean that the red wine necessarily caused the long life. And it's very rare that you'll see that one thing causes another thing in a study, and if it doesn't have the word cause in the study, then you shouldn't report that. Tip number 9, you see the word significant a lot in scholarly research. It doesn't mean it's important. It just means that it wasn't a result of chance, and it's a math thing. It's not an opinion. Tip number 10, I recommend visiting the site unpaywall.org. And it's the site it was built by people, and I'm not trying to remember who they were, but they believe that research should be freely available to everybody. So if you're on Google Scholar and you find a paper that's behind a firewall, if you go to unpaywall.org, more and more it's likely that you'll find a free version of the paper there. They have now more than 26 million free articles. Okay, and I'm going to just leave this up here now, some random bonus tips. A journalist resource, in addition to doing these summaries of scholarly studies, we also have tip sheets, and we're trying to do more of this, of how to do a better job and a more meaningful job of covering various public policy topics. So these are some of the tip sheets we have on our site. I recommend you visit it. And that's all I got. Track is amazing, yeah.
Okay, any questions?
Just, it's another tip that if you're looking for a study, there's a Twitter hashtag, which is ICANN
free research
PDF. It's like, remember the cat videos, ICANN has cheeseburger? It's ICANN has PDF, and you can get on and say, I need Dylan Smith's study on blah, blah, blah on there, and you'll get it within about 20 minutes.
And I just learned this because we did a tip sheets on guns. What you buy in the box is a cartridge, and the bullet is the thing that comes out of the cartridge.
The bullet's what hits you.
The bullet is what hits you. And to gun enthusiasts, it really, really matters, and it's one of the reasons they don't trust journalists. Yeah, so it's our ammunition, a box of ammunition.
Anybody else?
Yeah, there's been a lot of reporting about studies that haven't been borne out. And I'm just wondering, is there a way that these websites that you're guiding us to sort of track the ones that have been shown to be suspect or even unproven?
Our website does that to some extent. These websites don't. The best tip is to treat it like any other story. Get a second source to say, hey, what do you think about this? Oh, retraction-wise. It's called, is it just retractionwise.com? Yeah.
Retraction Watch.
Watch.
Great, thanks. We'll get Steve Wallman up here.
Thank you.
I have it loaded.
Thank you very much. Report for America is a new program that launched with its first core in January of 2018. It is a national service program that places local journalists into, places great talented journalists into local newsrooms. It's loosely modeled after like Teach for America, AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, and the goal is 1,000 reporters in 5 years. Basically, it works with two parallel competitions. There's a competition among newsrooms who want to host Report for America reporters, and there's a competition among reporters who want to be Report for America fellows, and then we choose 3 to 5 reporters per newsroom, and then we give finalists to those newsrooms, and they make the final decisions themselves. So this is the first class of 13 people. They're from all over the country, and you'll see at the bottom the newsrooms are all sorts of different types. There's commercial, nonprofit, public radio, newspapers, independent nonprofits, independent for-profits. We're completely agnostic about organization type, and as long as it's focusing on local news. So the financial model is we pay half the salary. Report for America, we figure it's a entry-level salary, and it's actually set by the local newsroom because the salary ranges, what counts as an entry-level salary is so different depending on what state you're in. We have one organization where the starting salary is $28,000 and another where the starting salary is $48,000. So that's set by the newsroom. We pay half up to $20,000. We cap it actually there. And then we encourage the newsroom is on the hook for the other half, but we work with the newsroom, the news organization, encourage them to raise some of that from the community. That can be from a local community foundation, from donors, from a crowdfunding campaign, whatever seems most practical. And that's because we feel like in the long run, community journalism is not going to survive unless the community supports it. And obviously, as we've talked about, in the last few days, there are a lot of different ways that the community can support it through subscriptions and events and other things. But one of them is by directly supporting reporters this way. So in the first year, just a little bit of information about kind of what we found in the first core. Most of the reporters, we had about 1,000 applications for 13 slots for reporters. So we were able to have a very high quality group. And it also meant that they had experience. They had 1 to 2 years of experience. It did not end up being like Teach for America, where most of the people they pull are seniors from college. So that's great. It means that they can really have an impact in your community right away and in your newsroom right away. This is not a remedial journalism training program. It's a helping improve community journalism program. About half of them had roots in the community and half were from outside. That was sort of a big question that we weren't sure how it was going to play out or what newsrooms wanted. Actually, most of the newsrooms did not want or did not care whether the person was from their area or not. We surveyed them and they said, just get us the best possible reporter you can get us. There were a few exceptions to that who said, yeah, it would be really great if they could come from the community. And there were different requests. Some needed Spanish-speaking reporters. Some did want people with certain types of experience. And the reason we sequence it where we pick the news organizations first is so that by the time we have the application window for the reporters, we know who the news organizations are and what they need. So we can kind of keep our eye out and also give the reporters a chance to express preferences. So when the reporter application happens, there's a list of who the news organizations are, and they can express a preference. It's like the Peace Corps in the sense that we say we can't guarantee that you're going to get this, but do you have preferences? the thing that warmed my heart most was that the most popular option that people checked was place me where I'm needed most. And that kind of bespoke a wonderful spirit that we got from the people who applied for this. This was, to be sure, there were some people who were applying because this was a job and they're applying wherever they can apply to get a job. But there's a real passion about local news. These are people who really want to get out into the rest of the country and do local reporting. In terms of the diversity of the news organizations, it was really all over the place. We had rural, urban, big, little, and we were very agnostic about that as well. The main thing that we look for in the applications are what are your gaps in coverage? And now a gap can mean a regional gap, an issue gap, an ethnic community that's not covered, but tell us what's not being covered that should be covered. That does tend to mitigate against general assignment. There's because everyone's needy. Like, we had a lot of applications from news organizations. We probably could have funded almost all of them in the sense that everyone has need. So in order to differentiate, and also because I think it helps us to track impact, we kind of push towards having people identify a particular gap or beat or goal that they're going for beyond, hey, we're a good organization and we need another reporter. And then you have to say, how would you use the Report for America reporter to fill that gap? So you're not allowed to say, no one covers poverty in the Delta, and we're going to use the Report for America person to run our Twitter feed. Like, they actually have to do the gap filling. A secondary factor, but important one, is, and I think this is sort of a big question to think about with smaller organizations. Well, it's actually not just smaller organizations. It's, do you have the editing capacity and the mentoring capacity to really work with someone? We have to watch out for the core members and make sure that they're going to have a good experience. And we have had some situations where our people have kind of confided that they're not getting much editing. So just, we want all news organizations to make sure that they have the capacity to manage this person well. We also ask them to have a mentor, a separate mentor, who is not their line editor. It could be even a retired person, or retired editor from the community. It can be someone else in the newsroom, but someone who can work with that reporter on more general brainstorming or support in the newsroom, things like that. And then impact in the community. By that we mean, with sort of limited resources, we're focusing this on news organizations that are filling a gap within the community. We don't want to fund the fifth TV station in a community unless they're doing something really special and different from the other four. And so we're looking for organizations that have a niche or have big impact in their community in some way. 28 positions in 2019, so we're doubling the core in 2019. We had 13 this year, and doing 28 next year, and then the third year it's like 1 billion positions or something like that. It's a little hockey stick in the third year. But for next year it's 28 positions, so there will be a whole bunch of reporters available. The deadline is soon. It's October 31st. It's not a particularly complicated or long application. The heart of it is really those first two questions, like what's the gap and how are you going to fill it? If you get to be a finalist, then there's a few more questions and interviews and things like that. But that's basically it. And then we stagger it so that after the news organization application is over, then the core member application opens. So that's November 1st, I think, is when the core member application is done. So the news organization will find out by the end of the year. And just to end on the kind of like awesomeness of these people, because we're really proud of them and the impact that they're having. Like, so this is Will Wright, who's in Lexington, Kentucky. This is a kind of a good example of how an organization looked at this. Is the Lexington Herald Leader, and they said we have one reporter covering 24 counties in eastern Kentucky. So now they have two reporters covering 24 counties. But you know, he was able to, in his second week on the job, he did a story about how they haven't had running drinking water in in one of the counties for that week. Imagine in like New York or Chicago, we're not going to have water this week. And it, you know, got some attention, and a month later, the guy running the water district was forced out, and then a month after that, the state legislature found $5 million for more emergency repairs of the water system. And one thing I love about this story is that this was not a 6-month-long investigative project. This is his second week on the job. So he was doing, you know, basic reporting. He was going to the meetings, and these are people who have been complaining about their horrible water situation for a long time, and no one was listening. So Michelle Liu is at Mississippi Today, and she has a particular beat of criminal justice. So Will, his beat was a region, like any kind of story in Eastern Kentucky. Michelle Liu at Mississippi Today, which is a statewide organization, she's doing criminal justice. And she pretty quickly came on to the, you know, this, just actually she found this while she was refreshing, she just was refreshing the prison website and noticed that the number changed and started to get curious about it. And it turned out this horrific thing was happening of 16 violent prison deaths. These are not people dying of old age. These are people being killed by other prisoners for the most part, 16 in 1 month. And I loved how she was just relentless in following it. You know, every time there was another one, there was a new story, even if she didn't know exactly what had happened. And I think there's still a lot of mystery to this of what is going on there. And I'll end on this story because I just think it's such a perfect comparison. July 23rd was the day that the New York Daily News announced that they were eliminating half their staff. On the same day, our two Report for America people had the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times, and it was a very cool story about how they had had a you know, there was so much violence there and so many killings, and they decided that instead of just doing a story about the killing, that they would do a deeper dive in about the role of barbers. One of the people who was killed was a barber in the African American community. The Chicago Sun-Times application to us was interesting. They basically said, we haven't done a good job of covering the west side and south side of Chicago, and we would like reporters from the community. And these two guys are from the community. And so they've done a really great job. So it's, you know, big publications, little publications. Really, it's all about having an impact on the local level and just getting great journalists into the community, into organizations like yours, and having an impact. So I would love any questions you have on how
We're
any
going
of
to have
this
to
works, or
have you
do that.
connect with them afterwards because we're just so far over schedule. So I apologize.
So I'm here for the rest of the day.
All right, awesome. So can we have Connor Lynch come on down?
You're hot there and you got a mic.
Hello. Excuse me. Hello. So my name is Connor Lynch, and I'm currently a senior at the University of Missouri School of Journalism. And so my professor, Ebony Reed, had me come present on behalf of her. And so what I want to lay out to you guys is just the way the School of Journalism works. We're really prideful of the Missouri method, which is widely recognized to make the University of Missouri one of the top journalism schools in the world. And so what the Missouri method is, it simply is giving students hands-on experience while working in the classroom. And so specifically for my media sales class with Professor Reed, we have been working with two local news organizations in the city of Columbia, Missouri. Namely the Columbia Missourian, which is a local paper, And for them, we've been working on selling advertisements in their special sections. And then now our class has transitioned to the Missouri Business Alert, which is an online business news platform. And we've been selling sponsored stories and other types of branded content. And so a month and a half ago, I had 0 sales experience, and I also had pretty limited knowledge of the industry. But since then, I've made 2 sales, and I'm already inching near my semester-long goal, which is in the 4 figures. And so my professor and I have worked together to make this presentation just on what I've learned in my short time on how to build relationships quickly and close those sales in a tight timeline. And so the first thing when it comes to sales is prospecting, which is just knowing who you're trying to sell to. And Jay mentioned a lot of this earlier, but the first thing I want to touch on here is utilizing the pre-existing relationships that you have. And so what this can do is, first, they're obviously easier to get a hold of. They're people that you probably have the contact information and possibly a relationship already built, which can then segue into the sale much easier. And secondly, people prefer to buy from people they already know. And so that gives you a great leg up and advantage in the sales process. The next thing in regards to prospecting is to focus on those who have the power or influence to make business decisions. I think one of the most frustrating things I've experienced is spending 10, 15 minutes on the phone or in a meeting with somebody who then had no power to make the decision, and I have to restart that thing all over again. So to be more efficient, focusing on people that can do that. And one way Professor Reed has discussed this in class is through a 3 wide and 3 deep method. And essentially what this means is if you're working with an organization or a business, to try to build relationships with people in 3 different departments or areas, and then also 3 different people within each of those departments. And essentially what this does is it gives you leverage, especially long term. If the one person you're in contact with leaves or loses that influence, you have other people that can help you out there. And one way I've done this with my experience, so one of my sales was actually with a Greek organization, a fraternity at the university. And I knew one guy in that fraternity. But before I went and made that sales call and made that sales meeting, I had him introduce me to a few of his friends. And so that way, a week later, when I went in and spoke with the fraternity president, I had names of 4 guys that I could say, hey, I've met this guy and this guy, and they were able to kind of act as leverage in that situation. And I walked out of that meeting with a check. The next thing is person before pitch. And so this is pretty simple. It's basically just valuing the relationship before you value your product when it comes to a sales call. The second point, consult to discover the needs and desires of your client. Just make sure that it's not going to change what you're offering, but by discovering what exactly it is they're looking for, you can frame how you offer that, and it usually leads to better results. And this last thing is just kind of a general statement, which would be to minimize the risk involved in losing that relationship. But one example that I experienced, somebody else in my class, was promising more than they could deliver. And so the second you under-deliver on a promise or a guarantee you make to a client is the second they lose trust, and that relationship will likely break, and future sales are almost impossible from that point on. Next is when you're giving the pitch to just keep it simple. Keep in mind, especially with these online local news platforms, that a lot of the revenue models might be complex, and a lot of people don't have much knowledge or experience with those models. And then next, to not overload on information. So giving somebody too much information about what you're offering can actually cripple them from being able to make a decision. Even if it's all good information, just them having to process it all and get back to you makes that a much more difficult process on their end. And finally, be prepared to give customized information. So this goes back to that consulting step. Figure out what it is they're looking for and be able to prepare that in a way and present that in a way that is relatable to their business. Next is dealing with objections. So objections are almost inevitable when it comes to selling or asking for a sponsorship or partnership. But I think it's important to not attempt to try to avoid them. Properly addressing objections can actually lead to a much better relationship with the client. And avoiding those or not directly addressing them can lead to levels of miscommunication, as well as lingering doubts or concerns on their end when it comes time to close the sale. And one model or acronym that we've used that's helped me a lot is LAARC, which as you can see is listen, acknowledge, assess, respond, and confirm. And so this listen and acknowledge, these first two steps, go back to that consulting again, or when they bring up the objection, realizing exactly what it is that they are objecting, and then acknowledge that as a valid objection. Because if it's an objection on their end, it's going to be an objection for you as well. It's valid to you. And then you want to assess how what you're offering can relate to that objection, or how it can, how you can respond to that. And then that comes in the response. And finally, the confirm, which is addressing to the client exactly how your product or what you're offering can either diminish that objection, take that away, or at the very least outweigh that objection. So the benefits that you're being able to provide would outweigh that. And this last point, to not answer objections before they're raised, I learned, so when I was working with the Missourian, the sales staff full-time there basically gave us the green light to waive all coloring fees. And the constant objection I got when I would call people is that it was too expensive, or that they couldn't afford it, wasn't in their budget. And so it was very tempting to lead those calls or lead those initial offerings by saying, we can waive the coloring fee and make this a more affordable option for you. But I continued to not do that, and it actually ended up working out well, because two of the two sales I made, they never came up with objections, and so I was able to bring in that additional coloring fee as revenue that I could have lost had I just led with that. So it's important to not assume that they're going to have doubts or concerns about things that you might experience from other people. And then lastly is just the post-sale efforts, and these are all pretty straightforward, but to communicate outside of the sales calls, essentially just make sure that they don't feel like all you're using them for is their checks and their money, and build that relationship. And the next thing is to share results. So a lot of what you're going to be offering is pretty tangible to see, whether that be their advertisement or the partnership. For the Missourian, they were buying part of the special section, and so one of the clients was actually not in Columbia, but probably a couple hours away. And so what I'm going to do when it comes out here this week is not just send the digital copy, but get a print copy of that newspaper and mail it and just thank them. So just sharing the results, letting them see exactly what it is that they were doing with you. And then foster repeat sales in that initial communication after the sale. And then asking for referrals is always, it can never hurt, and it can always lead to, or can potentially lead to future sales. And so really quickly to recap, I want to give you guys just a couple tangible things that you can take away in regards to each of these steps. So first, with prospecting, I would encourage you all to make a list of 10 people you know already that have the ability to make decisions or influence business decisions. And start from there and just see where it goes. If they're not interested, ask them for referrals, and then your list can go on from there. In regards to person before pitch, I would recommend that you spend the first several minutes of your sales call or your meeting with them just asking questions, catching up if it's a relationship you've already built. And this also goes into the consulting stage. And take a significant amount of time before you bring up what you're offering or the details of that. Next, keep it simple. Just meet them where they're at, whether it comes to their knowledge of the industry, the product, or their interest in the thing. Don't act like they're super interested if they're not, and vice versa. Next, dealing with objections. I found this very valuable, is just to keep track of any objections that a potential client raises in the selling process, so that when it comes time to close the sale, you can readdress those and make them feel more comfortable about the decision at the end. And then finally, post-sale, as I mentioned, just reach out to these clients as need be to maintain that relationship. And that's all I've got. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. That was excellent. You might be getting some job offers after that. Is Randy here?
I think he left this morning.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, good. So we're going to go into a break, a very, very brief break, and get back here for one more panel discussion, and then we'll do lunch. Okay? And then we'll talk to you after that about the breakout sessions and the on-conferences.